In our last presentation, we discussed some of the complicated aspects of capitalism, especially late-stage capitalism. The knee-jerk reaction of most young people conceding to these shortcomings is a reflexive embrace of socialism, but that's problematic too. One of the temptations of a centrally planned government is price controls. The leader promises to lower prices by fiat upon the hope of mollifying the masses, who are suffering under crushing poverty. So he waves a magic wand and says, this product is by state decree such and such a price, and it shall never rise so long as the edict is in force. The problem with that is that price is a unit of measurement. Depending upon the price of something, you know how scarce it is. If it's more expensive, you know that it's finite. If it's more abundant, then you know that the price is going to tell you that it's going to be cheap. Gold is expensive because it's rare. Dirt is cheap because it's common. Thomas Sowell, in Basic Economics, comments, if the government today were to come up with a plan for universal access to beachfront homes and put caps on the prices that could be charged for such property, that would not change the underlying reality of the high ratio of people to beachfront land. With a given population and a given amount of beachfront property, rationing without prices would have to take place by bureaucratic fiat, political favoritism, or random chance. But the rationing would still have to take place. Even if the government were to decree that beachfront homes were a basic right of all members of society, that would still not change the underlying scarcity in the slightest. Prices are like messengers conveying news, sometimes bad news in the case of beachfront property desired by far more people than can possibly live by the beach. Aristotle talks about history's first socialist in his book, Politics. There he recounts Phallius of Chalcedon, who promised all his citizens equal plots of land. He writes, there are some persons who think that the first object of government should be to regulate well everything relating to private property. For they say that a neglect herein is the source of all seditions whatsoever. For this reason, Phallius the Chalcedonian first proposed that the fortunes of the citizens should be equal, which he thought was not difficult to accomplish when a community was first settled, but that it was a work of greater difficulty and one that had been long established. Phallius' scheme came to grief when population growth caused trouble. Because there were now more people and only a finite amount of land, Phallius started attacking neighboring city-states to get more land, and they collapsed due to being constantly at war. At any rate, in a socialist state, the leadership will try to manipulate things by imposing price controls, which is essentially like removing the thermometer from an HVAC system in a home. Without that thermometer, the air conditioning unit won't know how to regulate itself. The system will go into oscillations. It's also like trying to solve the problem of speeding on the highway by putting a sticker over the speedometer in cars so that there's a constant speed of 45 miles per hour. So whether the car is actually doing 80 miles per hour or 20 miles per hour, it'll always read 45. By removing prices from the system, you won't know how many resources you have. Why? You remove the only gauge which will tell you. So you have a misallocation of resources. Like say, for instance, if you had somebody wasting resources on milk on making bologna-flavored ice cream. The market doesn't want bologna-flavored ice cream. In economics, there's something called opportunity costs. Resources are finite. So if you have resources diverted to making bologna-flavored ice cream that just sits there and rots because nobody wants to buy it, that's milk that can't be used for yogurt or cheese or things that people would have bought. So waste in one area causes shortages in another. The old Soviet Union had a big problem with wasting resources like this, whereas a market economy would receive price signals that would let them know what products to ditch and what products to make more of. The Soviets had cut all price signals, so they would do things like making 1940s telephones when the rest of the world had moved on to cell phones. When asked why they wouldn't innovate, they would say things like, we've already allocated 50,000 jobs to making 1940s telephones. It would be too much of a hassle to close that factory and open a new facility making something more modern. So they misallocated all those resources toward old technologies that no one wanted. The Soviet Union was, of course, known for its empty shelves and long lines to get basic necessities. The irony of this is that Russia was one of the most resource-rich places on Earth. Because of fiscal mismanagement, though, they wasted tons of raw materials and ended up with shortages. In our next presentation, we'll explore a third option, one diverging from capitalism and socialism, and which points toward a whole new economic paradigm shift, which is not so wasteful of resources. As you know, The New American has partnered with a platform called Locals recently. It's a for-pay platform where fans can help support the show for like $5. Think of it like seeing a street musician and throwing a few coins in his cup. Besides, if you sign up, I can stop selling my bootleg merch, like the Daniel Natal urinal cake. That was an even worse seller than the Daniel Natal in action figure. Turns out that kids didn't exactly care to see Daniel engaging in an action as he surfs the web, or engaging in an action as he watches TV. These were not big sellers. Embarrassingly, focus groups determined that the in-action figure in particular did slightly better when rebranded as the Daniel Natal Voodoo Doll. At any rate, drop by our web address at thenewamerican.locals.com if you want to have more intimate contact with the hosts, get additional content not available elsewhere, and if you want to help support the show.